So let's get back to our panels, just to show you that we have applied the quick cleanup on this layer, and we are going to use the Liquify filter on exactly the same layer. So how to apply the filter? It's very simple. The layer on which we are going to work needs to be selected, and all we need to do is to head to the Photoshop menu bar and select Filter and Liquify. After selecting the filter, we have this property window, and inside this pop-up window we have several options available. The Liquify filter is maybe the best known as a tool to slim people, to make them look thinner. However, you can use it in many different ways. You can, with the Liquify filter, pull pixels, you can push them, you can twirl them, you can stretch them. You have many different options available here. However, as often with Photoshop, the most powerful and the most useful technique is very simple. So to shape this image, to work on this portrait, I'm going to use only the first icon, the forward warp tool, and it allows me to push pixels in the direction that I wish to. The size I'm going to be adjusting dynamically, as you can see by pulling this slider to the left, I have decreased the size of my brush. Now it's only 2 pixels. If I push it towards the right hand side, I have increased the size. It's really huge, but I'm not going to use the slider to work with the size of my brush. I will be working with very handy keyboard shortcut. So to increase the size of my brush, I'm just hitting the right square bracket. As you can see, the slider moves and I'm increasing the size. To decrease the size, I can either hit several times or just keep the left square bracket pressed. So if I'm holding it, it increases. If I'm holding the left square bracket, it decreases the size of my brush. When it comes to the pressure, let's start with around 50. As you can see, the difference with the pressure is that if I have the pressure set at 50, it modifies the image in a pretty strong way. I'm going to just reverse those changes. If I have the pressure set as much lower value, the modifications are not going to be that strongly visible. So it's up to you. It depends on with what tool you are working, if you are working with a mouse or with a tablet, but basically it's easier to work with pressure between maybe 15 and 50 rather than pushing the slider all the way to the right and work with the high values such as 95. That is going to distract the image in a very dramatic way. So now to get rid of those changes, I'm just hitting Alt Command Z. So this is the original image to start with. So let's first start with the face. As you remember, at the beginning I have marked those very simple lines to mark the areas I would like to correct. So I would like to slim the face in a very subtle way, for sure not like this. Yes, I forgot to decrease the pressure. I'm going to go and keep it around 19. The size of the brush should be much larger than the area that we are going to affect, because if we have the size of our brush smaller, we are going to be pulling small parts of the image. When the brush is bigger, we are going to work in a much more harmonious way, as you can see. We have to be careful because I don't want to push the lips, so it's always question of balance. So now I'm pushing the line of her chin, but I'm keeping my eye as well on the lips, as I don't want to affect them at all. I can push the line of the chin a little bit up, just to make the face a little bit slimmer in a very subtle way. It's very helpful to zoom in and out to look at the overall effect. Let's work now a bit on the other side of her head and just make the neck a little bit slimmer. So you cannot just work with the line of the neck, as it will be against the anatomy. So I'm going to just push the whole line of her arm, neck, ear. I don't want to overdo this, but this very simple way to make the face a little bit slimmer and the upper part of the body a little bit lighter. So now I can maybe work a little bit further with this line. I don't want to change her bone structure. I want to keep the personality. It's a portrait. It's not about turning this person into someone else. Applying this technique, the whole point is to just retouch, fix in a very subtle way the areas that could be a little bit retouched, and to keep the emphasis on the strongest parts of the image, like her eyes that are beautifully lit, the nose, the lips. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to push this line further. Maybe let's now work a little bit with the hair. As I've mentioned at the beginning, I would like to add a little bit of a volume. Notice that I'm dynamically all the time changing size of the brush. When I'm working with wider part of pixels, like for example here with this part of the hair, the brush can be bigger, but when I'm turning towards this area, I don't want to pull her forehead, I just want to pull the hair. I'm pressing the left square bracket, decreasing the size of the brush and only working with the hair. So I can maybe increase the pressure a little bit from 19 maybe to 25, zoom in and just to pull that line of hair a little bit upwards. Okay, I want to make this shape a bit more harmonious, so to make it a little bit fuller, I'm going to pull the pixels a little bit stronger to have this nice full arc. And I can work as well with this part of her hair, as it creates this nice full wave. Okay, I can push the hair a little bit at the crown of her hair. So let's decrease the size of a brush and pull it a little bit upwards. This part I can actually pull in a little bit, and maybe this part, to add a little bit of waves, I can pull out. It's all very intuitive process. You have to judge all the time with every brush stroke. You need to zoom in, zoom out to adjust the image in a very dynamic way. It's not about achieving one step that was set at the beginning. It's a very creative and intuitive process. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to push the hair further. Let's now move a little bit lower. Notice how by pushing this line of her arm, I made her head lighter. When I finish working with the Liquify filter and I go back to my layers panel, I will be able to switch on and off the layer, and then we will be able to see what was the change that was applied. Here I'm just going to make the arm a little bit slimmer. Don't worry about the background, it can be very easily fixed in the end. So now I'm just looking at the shape of her arm, just fixing those little details that will make a overall really massive result in the end. So I'm going to keep this arm in proportion. Okay, now let's work on the other arm. So I'm working with the really big size with the huge brush. It makes this adjustment much easier. if I would decrease the size of my brush, I would be pulling smaller parts of her arm, and then I could just run very quickly in trouble and go against anatomy, and that's not what I want in this case. Okay, so let's just keep it around this shape. We can fix this part a little bit, as now I have flattened her breast by pulling the arm in. Let's zoom out and have a look at the overall image. Okay, it's looking very good. Let's zoom in a bit and let's check. I can maybe pull in just this part, tiny little bit, the arms, just to have the line a little bit more straight. Now with exactly the same technique we can fix this part and just pull this part of the corset inside, and that way we have widened the arm. It's a bit tricky, this part of the image, especially that it's with a very soft focus. I have taken this picture with the shallow depth of field, so I was focusing on her eyes, so the face is sharp. This part of the arm was further away from the lens, so it's not that sharp. It's a bit softer, but it's not a problem. Okay, now I'm trying to just straighten this line a little bit, and we'll see in a second when I switch off this layer how massive improvement we have achieved with this Liquify filter. It's very important to zoom in and out. Never make the mistake of working on one part of the image and zooming in very, very closely. It can be really difficult to judge the overall image. You can be focusing on one little part, and after a while when you zoom out, you can notice that you made some changes that are completely out of proportion and have to be corrected. Okay. So let's look again at the hair. The back of her head is a little bit flat, so I can still maybe push a little bit upwards, and maybe this part pull a little bit towards her neck, just to break this flat line, as her hair is very beautiful with these soft natural waves. I can make the ear a little bit smaller by pulling it inside, and still work on the neck. In this case, to work with the neck is very, very simple, since it is soft as well. I haven't focused on this part. Just be very careful with elements that are really sharp. If I would like to make some changes to the nose or to the eyes, it would be much more difficult. Okay, so at this stage I'm happy with the corrections applied with the Liquify filter. Let's click OK. Notice that the Liquify filter, when we are applying those changes, it's irreversible. It is possible to work with the Liquify filter in a non-destructive way if we had this image as a smart object. However, I know exactly what I want to achieve. I know which kind of corrections I want to apply to this image, and I'm not going to get back to it and change it. To me, more important is to work on the light and make those subtle corrections, and then I will be working with adjustment layers. However, once I have applied these changes, I'm going to flatten these two layers, and for sure I'm not going to change my mind and get back and make her arms wider. It's not the point.